Okay, 7:06. So I think we can begin. Hi everyone. I'm Linda Graham with the City of Milpitas. I run our water conservation program and work on other sustainability efforts at the city. And then we also have Albany here from the City of Sunnyvale.
Hello everyone, my name is Albany Nierenberg. I'm an Environmental Programs Associate within the Environmental Services Department at the City of Sunnyvale, and I'm really excited to have everyone here tonight.
We are super excited to hold this class on integrated pest management and natural pest deterrent. We're excited to work with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency to be able to host this class tonight. And let's start with our introduction. So some small things to just go over to make this class run as smooth as possible. So as you've noticed, all attendees are muted by default. Suzanne will pause periodically for questions, and Albany and I will be directing those questions to Suzanne. There are two ways that you can ask your question. During the actual presentation, we ask you to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And then after the presentation, at our end Q&A, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. I'd like to just clarify, we are not using the chat function tonight. So please put your question into the Q&A so then we can easily see all of the questions so that we can direct them to Suzanne. And then the webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly available on the BOSCA webpage. So a little background about BOSCA. BOSCA represents 26 agencies that include cities, water districts, a water company, and a university, all that purchase water from the wholesaler, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. BOSCA member agencies provide water to 1.8 million people and over 40,000 businesses in Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. BOSCA's goal is high quality supply of water at a fair price. So outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in the BOSCA service area. To go along with that, the landscape education program is one element of the conservation program. Outdoor water use reduction through the use of water efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that future water supply needs of our communities are met. So a few highlights on ways that you can conserve water at home as a Milpitas resident. We work with Valley Water to offer several different rebate programs. We have the landscape rebate program, which includes a lawn conversion rebate, irrigation equipment upgrades, and rainwater capture rebates. So our lawn conversion rebate is you get $2 back per square foot of lawn replaced with drought tolerant plants. And then, as I mentioned, we do have these other rebates available. And I think as you go through the class with Suzanne, hopefully you'll learn some things that you'll be able to apply for some of these rebates after you learn those best practices. We also do have a WaterWise indoor survey kit where you can go onto Valley Water's page and look for leaks in your home and just kind of play with your kids around to learn more about your home water and where there could be leaks. You can learn more at savewatermilpitas.org. And one note is that Sunnyvale also does work with Valley Water, but Albany is going to talk more detail about their program.
Thank you, Linda. So as Linda said, Sunnyvale also works with the Valley Water programs. We also use the landscape rebate program, which offers rebates for replacing lawns and plants that require a lot of water with drought tolerant plants or permeable landscape, hardscape. We also use the Gray Water Laundry to Landscape rebate program, also known as the I Heart Gray Water program. This program allows for properties that currently connect a clothing washer to a gray water irrigation system. It allows these properties to be eligible for a rebate. And you can also visit the City of Sunnyvale website on water conservation page to learn more about these programs. And then we also wanted to note that if you're looking to compost, residents of Sunnyvale can have the availability to visit our Smart Station in Sunnyvale. You can bring your own bucket and shovel and gather as much compost as you need for your garden.
So if you are not a resident of Milpitas or Sunnyvale, but you are a resident of a BOSCA agency, then these are some BOSCA programs that several retailers take part in, and check your retailer webpage to see which programs they take part in. So there's the BOSCA Lawn Be Gone program, which provides rebates to customers of participating water agencies for replacing lawn with water efficient landscaping, which varies from $1 to $4 per square foot. BOSCA also has a rain barrel program, which provides rebates of up to $100 for purchase and installation of rain barrels. A new addition for BOSCA is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on purchase of the Ratio 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. Through this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. Last but not least, BOSCA's redesigned landscape rebate program. This incorporates the Lawn Be Gone program, rain barrel rebates, and is going to add additional incentives for stormwater retention features. For more information, please visit bayareaconservation.org and check to see if your water retailer participates in the program. And just one more time to clarify, if you're a Milpitas resident or Sunnyvale resident, you will not have the BOSCA programs, you will partake in the Valley Water Rebate programs. I know it can get a little confusing, but we just want to overview all the possible rebates that are out there for Bay Area residents. And great. So yep, that's good.
Okay.
So please, we have upcoming classes, so please join us for future classes. Here at Milpitas, we'll also be hosting the rainwater harvesting class in November and the edible water-wise gardening for beginners class mid-November, but BOSCA is hosting several different great upcoming webinars, so please tune into those as well. And then for more resources, you can check out water-wise gardening in the Bay Area at bayareagardening.org. This site supports residents in water-efficient landscape renovations and management. Resources include gallery of gardens with plants identified, plant selection tools, and a watering calculator. And as Suzanne goes through her program, she will direct you to other resources as well.
I think that's the last slide, yeah.
So while Suzanne switches over screens, I'm gonna introduce our instructor today. So Suzanne Bontempto works as an environmental educator and integrated pest management advocate. She is the owner of Plant Harmony and program manager for Our Water, Our World, which was recognized for excellence in her field, winning with the 2013 Integrated Pest Management Innovators Award. Suzanne has worked in the horticulture industry for over 20 years in a variety of capacities, with landscape contractors, leading garden maintenance teams and retail nursery management. Suzanne loves plants, nature, and sharing any information she can to help others have success in their gardens and solve pest issues with a less toxic approach. She is definitely the one to go to for integrated pest management, and we are super excited to have her teach this class tonight. Suzanne, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to share some really fun information with you all tonight. So let's get started. So the agenda tonight is that we'll go through slides for about an hour, and then we'll have, as much time as you all would like for Q&A afterwards, although as Linda mentioned, I'll be pausing a couple times throughout our program. What we're going to learn tonight are the principles of how to garden with a less toxic approach, why working with an IPM approach means less pest and then how your garden is a dynamic ecosystem. The pest problems that I will feature at the end, if you have time and you want to stick around, are going to be ants, rats, and mice, other rodents like gophers, moles, voles, raccoons, other urban critters, slugs and snails, kind of pest problems that we might be seeing right now. So what IPM is, or what integrated pest management is, I kind of like to describe it as is a decision-making process. It allows us to look at the system, be it our house or garden, as a whole, and really identify what is the problem at hand. Oftentimes what we see are symptoms of a problem. So with this approach, it really helps us kind of clue into what the specific problem is, and then go from there on. Is this a problem that we can live with, or do we need to resolve it immediately? And then if we do need to resolve it immediately, we go through a combination of strategies that include cultural controls, mechanical controls, biological controls, and then lastly, chemical controls or pesticides. And we'd always want to use pesticides as last resort. And most of the time when we've gone through these other means, we won't need to use pesticides at all. And I will walk you through that. And then if there is a problem, if there is a plant on your property that has just always been kind of an issue, like it's always getting rust or black spot, or just doesn't bloom the way you want it, or it's really leggy and stretched because the neighbor's tree has gotten really big, and it just doesn't look as nice as it used to, give yourself permission to get rid of that plant. I know a lot of times we get very sentimental and we hold on to plants when they're just struggling, and it's just time to change it out for something new. So this is a nice illustration that speaks very, resonates with me, I should say, of what kind of IPM is. And it's really, becoming familiar with your environment and, noticing things, noticing when the roses are starting to bud, noticing when the leaves are starting to drop, just noticing the action and activity in your garden and also around your home. And then evaluating when we do see that there might be some aphids that have arrived on our roses, we could just notice. We can do some preventative methods. We could take some action. And then from there, if we have, let's just say we've blasted them all off with water, then we're going to monitor and see, are they coming back? And then do we need to, start that cycle again? But the foundation of integrated pest management or less toxic pest problem solving is really prevention. And so what I'd like to ask is what prevention looks like to you. So what kind of tools do we use to implement prevention? Is the timing of management action? Understanding that watering and fertilizing can actually increase the types of pest insects that might occur in our garden. If we're fertilizing with like synthetic fertilizers, for instance, or if we're watering too much or not enough, this can actually increase pest problems. And then another thing to understand is sanitation. Cleaning up the garden is key. And we're going to talk a lot about that since this is the time of year that we are going to be exercising some of those practices. But then most importantly, proper identification of the pest is key. If we don't know what the pest is, we can't solve it. So understand that a pest can be an insect, it could be a weed, it could be a disease. So identifying the pest is number one. And then understanding the life cycle of that pest. Is it a cool season weed, or is it a weed that only pops up once the rains come? Understanding the habitat and the timing of that pest, like spittle bugs, for instance, they pretty much only come towards the end of March, beginning of April, and they typically only last about 2 weeks. And so, knowing that they're going to go away on their own doesn't really lend itself to having to take any action other than blasting them off with just a hose, a strong stream of water. And I also understand that oftentimes when we do have a lush garden with a lot of flowering, different types of flowering plants, we're going to have a lot of beneficial insects. So knowing that beneficial insects are present, we might have a different type of threshold or tolerance of pest problems, knowing that they will take care of those aphids that are on the roses and that we don't have to take any further action. understand that 90% of the bugs that we see are actually good bugs in the garden, keeping the balance for us. A couple online resources that I just cannot not share with you is going to be the Our Water, Our World website, where this website is going to have an amazing library of fact sheets for you. These fact sheets are pest problem solving sheets that go through different topics like ants, aphids, yellow jackets, mosquitoes, and so forth. So check that out. There's also an Ask the Expert button on the homepage of that website, so that if you ever have a problem that comes up and you just want to get an answer, you can ask Monday through Friday and you'll get a response within 24 hours. And that is coming from BIRC, the Biointegral Research Center in the East Bay. And then, of course, the UCIPM website. If you haven't been to the UCIPM website, please visit it. It's an amazing resource for us. And the main reason why I like to always funnel all of my pest problem solving research to this website is because this is for California. And here in California, we live in a Mediterranean climate. And even though we might do some online research and find articles about the pests that we're researching, but if those articles are from like Purdue or Cornell, they get summer rains and we don't. So, do your research, but then come back to the UCIPM website to really understand the best means for pest problem solving. So, did you know that when you increase the health of your garden, you're actually reducing pest problems? It's amazing. So how we do this is we're going to continue to keep the soil and plants healthy. We want to amend the soil with compost. City of Sunnyvale, you've got your free compost right there ready for pickup. And what this means is when we are adding plants, we're going to amend the soil with compost, or, this time of year is great right before, after this significant heat. Hopefully temperatures are going to start to cool and we can put down a nice layer of compost on top of the soil with a nice layer of mulch on top of that, and just allow through, hopefully, the rainy season, that compost will work itself into the soil and be perfect for amending the soil as well. But the reason why we want to add compost is because it increases the health of the soil, it increases the health of the plants. Compost increases water holding capacity, it corrects the structure or helps improve the structure. So if you've got clay soil, it helps improve that clay structure. If you've got sandy soil, it helps hold nutrients as well. There's just so many amazing benefits to adding compost. And if you can get your hands on really good quality active compost tea, it's a beautiful thing just to do a broad spectrum spray of compost tea. And the reason why is because good quality compost, active compost, is loaded with microbiology that is a combination between beneficial bacteria, beneficial fungi. And I like to say that it's the nutrient transport enhancement system. The microbiology in compost breaks down organic matter. It helps with the decomposition process. It stores nutrients in the soil. It helps break down toxins and pollutants. And it also holds soil together. As I mentioned, it increases water capacity. It's just a win-win altogether. It's important to use organic fertilizers and feed our plants with organic fertilizers always. There are so many reasons why, but the couple main reasons why I'll mention is that organic fertilizers are going to feed the plants in a more natural way. It's going to allow the plants to take those nutrients more slowly over time. It's going to reduce those growth spurts that we see when we're using synthetic fertilizers. And what I mean by that is synthetic fertilizers kind of act like steroids for plants, always pushing a lot of new growth. That new growth is loaded with plant sugars, and that new growth is really tender. And the thing is that bugs, pests, insects are not ding-dongs. They recognize this new growth as an easy food source for them. So that's why we typically see pest insects on buds of flowers or on new leaves that have just flushed out is because those buds and those new leaves are loaded with plant sugars because they've been stimulated to grow. When we're working with organics, we see a reduction of that. And also when we're working with organics, we're increasing the microbiology, the microbes in the soil, and also the health of the soil. We want to take advantage of mulch when we apply a nice layer of mulch, and ideally the layer is going to be 2 to 4 inches. However, if you can only get 1 inch of mulch down, that's going to be fine too. But we always want to go for 2 to 4 inches of mulch. Mulch is going to reduce water evaporation rate significantly. It's going to protect the soil, keeping it warm through the winter months and cool through the summer months. As it breaks down, it adds nutrients to the soil, and it also creates habitat for beneficial insects. A couple things to keep in mind is that it is ideal to cover irrigation tubing. If we have that black tubing throughout the garden, we do want to cover it. It's going to protect that tubing and keep it cooler. And the other thing is we don't want to bring mulch up around the crown of plants. So the crown is where the stem of the plant meets the root system. And so that area of the plant always wants to be free of leaf debris, soil, and mulch. So just keep that in mind. And then I wanted to share that, yes, we are in the fall season, and fall is the ideal time to plant, to add more plants to your garden. And the reason why is because we're getting shorter daylight hours. We're moving towards cooler temperatures, especially at night. And hopefully we will have some rains that will help encourage healthy root growth and encourage healthy plants. And it'll give us a jump start on the plants becoming more established by the time the heat really comes on next year. A couple really awesome things to keep in mind. People often ask, well, what plants are best for my garden? Well, we want to always ideally choose plants that are going to be California natives or Mediterranean natives because they adapt to our region the best. We want to match plants that are going to be site specific. So what I mean by that is in your garden, you know, let's say you've got a nice 3 by 5 space that is in the morning sun, afternoon shade. We want to make sure we select plants that can take that morning sun, afternoon shade, and then are not going to get bigger than that 3 by 5 space. Cool thing to keep in mind is that when we buy plants, we typically get these really cool tags. And these tags are going to give us a lot of information. They tell us what the sun requirements are. They tell us what size the plant is going to get at maturity. So take advantage of that. And then also understand there's so many plants on the market now that are going to be pest and disease resistant. So look for those as well. A couple of really awesome resources that I found in preparation for this program where you can go, because I'm crazy for plant lists. I just love the plant lists. So the California Native Plant Society for the Santa Clara County chapter is going to be available for y'all. Of course, the Bosco website where we had that nice slide that talks about, you know, water saving, water-wise gardening and water-saving plant material. It's an amazing library of plants. And then also the Santa Clara County Master Gardeners has a really nice library of plants for water-wise gardening. And then another cool resource that you are most likely familiar with as well is the South Bay Green Gardens. So all really cool resources for you to find plants that are going to do really well on your property. I'd also like to share is when we do add plants to our garden, we always want to apply hydrozoning to our gardens. And what this means is grouping plants together with similar, within an irrigation zone with similar water needs and similar microclimate needs. And those microclimate needs are going to be the sun, the shade, the wind, the heat. So we really want to make sure we're grouping plants together with similar needs. That's going to really ensure a long-lasting, healthy plant. And then drip irrigation systems. That ratio controller, I am hearing from all my professional my friends at professional friends that install irrigation, that is really the coolest controller on the market. So the fact that there is this really awesome rebate, please take advantage of it. It is really fantastic. But irrigation controllers or irrigation systems really help us save water. And the reason why is because we're able to apply water in a very efficient, localized way. We're able to set those controllers for nice deep watering. We're able to only water the areas we want to water. That water is going to be in direct contact with the soil. Remember, I said it's going to be underneath that mulch. So it's going to reduce the water evaporation. We can set the timer now to water our plants early in the morning when the air and the soil temperatures are cool. And a good time to set those clocks is anywhere from like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And then we can also understand you can set the clocks for multiple start times. So if you've got clay soil or rocky soil and that water just isn't absorbing, sometimes we might need to set multiple start times so that we can get the volume out over a period of time. And something that I like to share, it's not always easy people are always asking, well, how long do I water my plants? Well, I can't really tell you that because I don't know what kind of soil you have. I don't know what the microclimates on your property are. So that's where you have to do a little investigation. But what I do want to share is that we really want to encourage deep root systems whenever possible. We really want to encourage root systems to mature to their capacity. And so be it like long and narrow and deep or broader and wide and deep. And the way we do this is by watering deeply and less often once the plants are established. It could take 2 years for perennials to become established. It could take 3 to 5 years for shrubs to become established, and it could take up to 5 years for trees to become established. So during that time, we want to coax those root systems to grow deeper, to grow wider. And the reason why this is so important is that if we were to have some significant heat, and we do not have a smart controller that can help manage the irrigation. If we're just watering normally, or let's just say the irrigation system broke and we didn't notice, plants with nice, deep, healthy root systems can withstand these types of stresses, heat stress, drought stress, not being watered for a while, much better than plants that have shallow root systems. So just keep that in mind. This is going to be a really cool aerial illustration that I found from the Vacaville Tree Foundation, and this really helps. So when we water, we always want to water at the drip line of the plant or out away from the canopy, because the root systems are typically stretching out, right, and down. So we always want to water those fibrous hairs of the new roots. We don't want to water and focus our watering at the crown or the trunk of our plants. So that goes for perennials, trees, and shrubs. And the reason why is because we can actually encourage crown rot and other diseases that would really be detrimental to our plants. Rainwater harvesting. There is a really fantastic rebate for you that Valley Water is offering for cisterns, and also there's the rain barrels that are also being a rebate for that. What I want to share that when we get 1 inch of rain and it falls over 1,000 square foot surface like your roof, you can capture up to 625 gallons of water. Isn't that remarkable? So here at my house, I have a 50-gallon rain barrel. It came with the house. I'm happy to have it. My city doesn't have rebates at the moment. So I'm excited. I'm really happy just to even have this 50 gallons because I use it on all my seedlings, because this is really great, nutrient-rich, free water. But on this other photo that's on the top, this is a cistern. And I would encourage you to check out your local irrigation supply stores. and see what is available. Also, farm supply stores would have this, but they make them now where they're narrow and can go along the side of a house and not take up a lot of space, but have really nice holding capacities. So check that out. It's really cool. It's easy, and it's free water. So here is just that resource again for rebates. This is for the Valley Water. And then, as you know, you can go to BASCWA for other rebates as well. And then I think that, well, Linda, was that it? Was there any other specific rebates that Sunnyvale or Milpitas has, or was this the main resource?
We both work with Valley Water, but
Okay.
if you live somewhere else, check your water retailer for their specific offerings.
Super. Thank you so much. And then, of course, I didn't mention the gray water laundry to landscape. However, it's very simple. You do not need a permit. The only caveat is that your washing machine does need to be at a wall that then the other, that's on an exterior wall. So on the inside of a wall that then is on the outside, because you have to just have access to the outside, and it needs to be above grade from your garden. So that's cool. But yeah, another really great way to take advantage of the water that you're using in the house to water your plants. So this is a moment that I will pause to ask if there's any questions. And I'm happy to take one or two right now before we continue.
We have one question asking if fall is a better season for plants than spring in the Bay Area.
Yeah, fall is the time to plant. And as I mentioned before, one of the main reasons is, well, we're going to take advantage of the shorter daylight hours, the cooler temperatures, and hopefully the rainy season. But most importantly, we're going to have a good solid 6 to 9 months before that heat spikes again. So that's really why we want to take advantage of the fall and get as many plants in as possible now, so that by next June, when the heat really comes on, those plants are really well established, those root systems are in, and they're going to be able to withstand that those higher temperatures. Great question.
We don't have it. Oh, we have one more question. Sorry, it just came up.
Okay.
They were asking about since the Bay Area has limited rainfall, how it works with doing rainwater collection. If you think you get enough water, even though you mostly only get it in the wintertime.
So the whole principle behind rainwater harvesting is to capture as much as you can. So as I mentioned, I only have a 50-gallon rain barrel, which is not very much water. So I specifically am only using it for my seedlings and my little veggie starts. However, if I had the space, and if I lived in a city that had an amazing rebate that like Valley Water is offering, I would take advantage and get the largest cistern holding tank that I could, because knowing that that is free water that's available, that I can capture on site and use. We, of course, are not going to rely on it strictly. You are also going to most likely be, watering your garden with other water, maybe through the city, through your irrigation system. However, by having that water, you can really delay when you turn your irrigation systems on. You can use that water for watering your property for quite a while. So yeah, it's really cool.
We'll take one more question we have before we going is on does mulch limit growth of certain plants that propagate from the root?
No, mulch is not going to limit the growth. So plants that grow by rhizomes or runners are still going to pop up. Like for instance, I do have a native yarrow that spreads that way, and it is still growing just fine. It's really going to reduce weed seeds from germinating because they're not able to really root into the soil. And also the weed seeds are going to stay dry because they're not in contact with any water. Yeah. So no, it's not going to inhibit that.
Okay, I think we can take the other questions later on and continue.
Great
but
question.
Please keep submitting questions.
Okay, super. Yeah, please keep writing your questions in that Q&A. All right, let's go. So what we're going to be focusing on right now is maintenance around the garden. So we want to clean up our garden. We want to deadhead and cut back the perennials. We want to remove any dead or damaged branches from shrubs and trees. And then we want to remove any like diseased leaves, anything that's got rust, black spot, fire blight, things like that. We really want to take care of all of these problems and get them off site. We want to pick up any fallen fruit or nuts that are on our property. So if you are growing apples right now, this is at the end of the apple season, we really want to make sure we've cleaned up the ground where any fallen fruits have fallen. We also want to harvest any fruit that has been on that tree that didn't fall, that's maybe too ripe to enjoy. And the main reason why is because this is just an invitation for more pests. You know, it's an invitation for deer, it's an invitation for rats, it's an invitation for raccoons, and it can also be harboring any insects that might overwinter, like codling moth and things like that. And if you do have a number of fruit trees, understand as we move into winter, we want to start to get prepared for fruit tree pruning. So this time of year, it's too early to prune our fruit trees unless you have apricots and cherries, which hopefully you would have already pruned by now because those are summer pruners. We prune them right after the crops. But right now is a time to look around our properties. Are there any whips? Or are there any branches that if a storm were to come through would cause structural damage to a fence, to our house, things like that? So look around the property. This is the time to kind of prepare for our winter pruning. And then once those leaves fall and our plants are deciduous, I typically my rule of thumb is that we prune fruit trees just after the first of the year. However, that's just my practice, but know that we are very close to fruit tree, to deciduous fruit tree season. And this book, How to Prune Fruit Trees, is a really fantastic book that all of us professionals have. It is easy to find. You can get it at your local garden centers. You can get it online. So check it out if you do have fruit trees. And then if you're interested in adding more fruit trees to your property, we are right around the corner from bare root season. And this is when we can buy our fruit trees and berries and such at a very discounted price, because they're bare root. It is an excellent time to get them in the ground. And if you've got any questions or if you're curious about it, check out the Dave Wilson nursery website. And then tools that we want to use to keep pests out. So this is going to be key for preparing our home for these coming months where we get rodents coming in, we get ants and other crawling insects coming in. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are closing all the gaps, filling up any of the cracks and crevices. And we do that with weather stripping. We do that with door sweeps. We do that with a fresh bead of caulk around the windows, around the cabinets and countertops. And then most importantly is that screening. That screening in the picture is actually 1/4-inch hardware cloth. And the reason why I'm going to talk about this so much, as you see in a minute, is because 1/4-inch hardware cloth keeps out rodents. Mice and young rats can fit through a 1/2 inch square, but they cannot fit through the 1/4-inch. So that's why we want to work with this. This is galvanized screening or wire fencing. And when we go to the hardware store to buy it and you ask that associate where the hardware cloth is, they're going to look at you like you've got two heads, because people don't recognize this as being called hardware cloth, and I'm not exactly sure why. So I've come to learn to ask, where is the poultry wire or fencing? And then they show me to that department, and then I see my 1/4-inch hardware cloth. So it's very inexpensive, it's galvanized, and it's going to prevent rodents and primarily rodents coming into the house. And then around the property, around your garden, other types of barriers that we use, of course, are deer fencing, bird netting, exclusion frames like row cover, gopher baskets. We're going to use those to prevent the gophers from eating the root systems. We're going to use exclusion frames and baskets. So depending on what critter is coming in and eating the plants, so on the left, depending on what critter is coming to eat, it will dictate the size of the hole that we're going to use. So if it's 1/2 inch hardware cloth, 1/4 inch, if it's poultry wire, or if it's something larger. So the image on the left is a flower pot. A friend of mine had a bird feeder with a squirrel baffle around it. Somehow it broke, and instead of just throwing the whole thing away, she kept the squirrel baffle and put it over the flower pot to prevent the squirrels from digging in. And I thought that that was genius. And then the other frames you see here are to prevent like raccoons, urban critters from coming in and digging up and eating the vegetable starts. And also the larger frames are actually built to prevent rats from coming in, and that is lined with 1/4 inch hardware cloth. And then of course different types of weeding tools. As we start to move into the rainy season, we start to see the weeds coming up, but before the rains start, take advantage of sheet mulching those areas that are more prone to weeds, and that's layering cardboard and then putting a nice layer of 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top. We work with traps. All kinds of traps are also going to be really fantastic for managing pests. Oftentimes the yellow or blue or yellow and blue sticky traps that we see are just going to be there more for monitoring when pest problems are coming through, or when there's a certain threshold that then we do need to take action with an eco pesticide. But so it's more, the sticky traps are more monitoring devices. But fly traps, yellow jacket traps, these are definitely going to be our preventative ways to prevent these pest problems from getting worse. So for instance, with the yellow jacket trap, we always want to put it out that first nice sunny weekend in March. We might still be in the winter season. We still might get frost days after, but the queens are the only one that survives that colony. They will overwinter. They look like supersized yellow jackets. And when we put those yellow jacket traps out early, the queens are flying around on those warm days looking for a new place to make a nest. And for every queen we capture, we have reduced thousands of yellow jackets from our property. So this is an amazing preventative way to managing yellow jackets. And then other traps we'll look at are like gopher traps and rodent traps. We want to bring in the beneficial insects. And the reason why is because the beneficial insects are going to be the ones keeping the balance in the garden. We want to choose plants that attract beneficial insects. We want to grow biodiversity by adding a variety of flowering plants. And the plants that are going to attract beneficial insects more are going to be plants that act as nectar sources. And typically we're going to look at plants that have, that look like flowers that look like a daisy, or plants that are clusters of small flowers such as the yarrow. And the reason why we want flowering plants, plants that flower in a daisy or sunflower fashion, is because in this photo right here, we see a daisy. Those white petals, they're actually rays. The flowers are the yellow button in the middle where you see that ladybug enjoying the nectar from one of those flowers. Those are hundreds of little flowers in there. And of course, the yarrow is clusters of little flowers. And the reason why including plants with a lot of little flowers is so important is because most of our beneficial insects are little, and they do require to have a nectar source. Typically the adult version of the beneficial insect is also going to be a pollinator and or a nectar feeder. So these are just some samples of what flowers you can add to your garden that are going to attract beneficial insects. And here they are. As I mentioned, oftentimes the adult is not eating the bad bugs. Oftentimes the adult is just a pollinator or nectar feeder. It's really the larval stage or the juvenile of that insect that is going for the protein meal. So it's kind of fun. And then mostly we want to reduce our pesticides. I'd like to share that even though we might not use pesticides, or we might only use the organic eco-friendly ones, or we might make our own concoctions at home, which are actually, you know, more risky. What I'd like to share is all pesticides, eco-friendly ones, or the concoctions you make at home, they're actually designed to kill something. So really understand that when we use pesticides, we want to make sure that we are not going to apply them when beneficial insects are around. Something to keep in mind is that less toxic products may take a little longer to work. So we want to be patient. We want to understand the timing. If that pest insect is not present, or we just saw something chewing the leaves, but we don't know what it is, and we're just freaked out and we just want to spray something anyway, it's not really how it works. We really want to make sure we can identify the pest, we see that it's present, and that we're going to use the product according to the label. The best time to apply pesticides is at the end of the day, at dusk, when our pollinators are done foraging for the day. And then it gives that pesticide all night to dry, because once eco-friendly pesticides are dry, there are no residuals that are going to be toxic to us, our children, or our pets. Or the beneficial insects once it's dry. We really want to make sure that those products are dry. So, and then of course we always want to wear our PPE. We're all familiar with that term now, but it's really important when we are applying pesticides, because again, even though, you know, we might be using neem or insecticidal soap and we know that it's eco-friendly, we don't know what kind of dermal reaction we might have. So we always want to make sure we're wearing long sleeves, we're wearing non-cotton gloves and pants and all of that. And we're not spraying the pesticide when there's more than a 5-mile-an-hour breeze. So when we use pesticides, we always use them as a last resort. We always choose eco-friendly and less toxic ones. We apply according to the label. We always use our PPE. And this is a great time to take advantage of the dormant season, where we would apply horticulture oil and or some type of a dormant fungicide like copper soap to our dormant fruit trees and our roses. And when you are done using those products, or you're cleaning out a relative's shed, garden shed, or your own shed, and you see products that have been around for the last 10+ years, let's get them off site. Let's take them to our local household hazardous waste facility, because it's free and it's easy. And you can get information by just doing a web search for your city, local household hazardous waste collection facility or drop off, and they'll let you know where it is. All right. So I can take a pause for questions, and then we're going to move into pest problems. So I know we might go a little bit after the hour. So depending on how many questions, let's answer a few questions right now. And if you have to jump off, I totally get it. But if you want to stay on, it's probably about 10 more minutes, and I'm going to go through some pest problem solving. And what I'd also like to share is you're going to notice that we've gone through a lot of information, and I really have barely talked about pesticides. I've really just talked about how to use them. But pretty much all the pest problems that we would have has already been resolved with all of those tools and by increasing the health of your garden and so forth. So isn't that cool? Very, I think it's very like common sense.
So one question we have, and this seems to be a common question, is if you can use oak leaves for mulching.
Oak leaves you can use oak leaves as mulching. However, understand oak leaves are really tough, and it takes a long time for them to break down. So that's something that is a benefit, or sometimes it's not ideal. Also, I want to share that a question that's been coming up a lot lately, and more so, well, I'm in the North Bay, and we are definitely fire sensitive. So if you are in an area where you might be fire sensitive, understand when those oak leaves get really, really dry, if they haven't composted yet, it's a good idea either to get a nice layer of mulch on top or to like slightly turn, like scratch those oak leaves into the soil and then get like a nice layer of mulch on top. We don't, it's not ideal to have dry leaves on top of the soil when we get into the August, July, September of the following year. We really, if they haven't broken down by then, we want to just make sure we're not creating a fire hazard, so to speak.
On that same topic, we had a question of, can you clarify what sheet mulch is? And also, what type of environmentally friendly mulch do you recommend in addition to composting?
Sheet mulching is awesome. And I can actually, Linda, I can find a way to send everyone a PDF on how to sheet mulch. So that can be something I can do. Or you can email me afterwards. My email is at the last slide and I can send that to you. But essentially it's just layering cardboard. We want to make sure that when we lay the cardboard out, the edges are all overlapped. And then we're going to lay no less than 3 inches of mulch on top of that. We can do a layer of compost and then a layer of mulch. That's fine too. But the key here is that there's 3 inches, no less than 3 inches of material on top of that cardboard. And as that cardboard breaks down, it's actually enriching the soil, it's improving the soil, and it's awakening all the microbiology of the soil, and it's suppressing lawn or suppressing weeds. It's just really fantastic. And then in regards to what mulch is best, it's really up to you. Of course, I'm an advocate for natural mulches like wood, straw, the oak leaves. I am not a fan of like plastic or rubber mulches, but I really want to make sure that what I'm applying to the soil is going to be natural and it's going to break down. But you can go to your local landscape supply and have a look at the different types of mulch that are available. I know there's like 1/4 inch fir bark. There's 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch fir bark chips. There's shredded cedar. There still might be shredded redwood these days. I'm not sure, but you really just want to find what is aesthetically pleasing to you. I know that they have dyed mulches that are available as well, and those are food grade dyes, so you don't have to worry about your property getting poisoned. However, you do want to be mindful if you're putting any of those dyed mulches next to a concrete walkway or a patio, those dyes will leach out.
One last question before we do our couple of slides is, we have a question about a natural alternative to Roundup to get rid of bindweed that is in the yard and on the root of the tree.
I'm going to have to look up bindweed really quick. So maybe afterwards, if you're okay with sticking around, if you're not okay with sticking around, you can email me, Suzanne@plantharmony.org. It's SUZANNE @plantharmony.org. But I have to look up bindweed. Typically, it would be hand pulling. And then from there are some eco products on the market. But ideally, I'd really want to make sure, because the eco herbicides have a couple different functions. They're either top kill only, or there are some that are going to be top kill with a little bit of a root suppress. So if it's okay, can we talk about that after? Because I don't want to.
They said they'll stick around, and I think we can continue on since we're almost at 8.
Great. Okay, great, thanks. So let's look at some pest problem solving. So I think all of us start to see ants come into the house. which is no fun. But outside, you know, we could say there are some beneficial aspects to ants. I don't always want to throw them under the bus, so to speak. Ants are decomposers. They aerate the soil. They eat other insects. And I can tell you that a lot of times they're indicators for us. When we see ants climbing up those shrubs or climbing up our fruit trees, like our citrus, it's oftentimes an indicator that there's another problem going on, such as aphids or scale insects. Or if we see an excessive amount of ants around our foundation, sometimes it's an indicator that there's termites. But some ant solutions are going to be for when we have ants outside, climbing up those fruit trees or, you know, trailing up the shrubs. It is an indicator that there's going to be aphids or scales. So we really want to manage those pest insects, and usually blasting it off with a strong stream of water, working with horticultural oil, insecticidal soap, neem, things like that. It's going to be the trick. And then we can use sticky insect glues such as Tanglefoot, but we always want to make sure we are applying that Tanglefoot onto some type of banding material. And that banding material could be as easy as packing tape sticky side out. And the reason why we never want anything sticky to go onto the bark of our plant, because we always want to be able to remove that banding material. We want to remove that insect barrier, and we don't want to be pulling off any bark. But there's other ant baits out there, such as the Monterey Ant Control. That is really a combination between iron phosphate and spinosad, or boric acid. You'll see these liquid bait stations that you can just on a stake put them inside in the soil. But if we are using those bait stations, what I encourage is getting like a gopher basket that's opened up and put it over that bait station so that other critters cannot access it. You really only want the ants to access the ants bait stations. And then indoors, we want to clean up the scouts when we start seeing them come in, and just soapy water is fine. And then we want to seal up those cracks and crevices with caulk or with mortar or whatever you need to, you know, seal it up with. And then, and that's if we could see where they're coming in. Of course, new weather stripping around the doors and windows is going to be really helpful. And then if we need to use a bait station, understand that bait stations are the most effective way to manage ant situations. And the reason why is because they take the bait back to the colony, they feed everybody, and then everybody comes to their end. So the bait stations are going to be the best choice. The Taro and the Harris, these are the consumer favorite. And the reason why is they're exactly the same thing. They're both boric acid, liquid boric acid in a sugar bait, and the ants go bonkers for it. So that is going to be the pesticide of choice. However, if we've got pets or children, we want to make sure we've got these bait stations out of their reach, because who likes to chew on little plastic things? Puppies, children, and so forth. So make sure that whenever we're using these types of products, it's really only for the pest it's intended for. If we need to use a spray, products like Orange Guard are awesome. These are just, it's just active ingredient is delemonine, the oils of a citrus rind. It's not going to smell like a stinky pesticide. It's not toxic, though it is just going to be a contact kill, like most liquid pesticides. However, sometimes we do need to use a liquid as well. And most importantly, it has some repelling properties that last about a week. So I actually use this around like the outside of my front door and things like that. A couple other products that we might see on the market are going to be powdered boric acid, and this is going to be about the size of a grain of salt, and it is going to, if we do a dusting of it, like behind cabinets, behind appliances, if we have to go on the wall for plumbing or electrical, we can dust the inside of that frame, and as long as it stays dry, it will be available as a pesticide for duration. And the way it works is that ants and cockroaches are, you know, they crawl over it, they groom themselves, they ingest it that way, and it disrupts their stomach enzymes, and it will kill them that way. And then diatomaceous earth, I think a lot of us hear about diatomaceous earth a lot. Diatomaceous earth is just crushed diatoms. This is not the pool grade diatomaceous earth. This is not the toxic one. This is the one that is inert. It is not toxic. However, it is a lung and eye irritant. We are not supposed to breathe this dust in. It is very fine dust, like chalk. And what happens is it gets on the skin, so to speak, or the exoskeleton of the insect, and it just dehydrates them. It's very effective. But again, we're using it in the house to like put it in some cracks and crevices. We want to make sure it's not available for puppies to sniff, for children to sniff, things like that, because again, it's a lung irritant. And then back to our traps, we have a lot of sticky traps that we see in the pesticide aisle. We're going to use these again as indicators. Remember, we're going to see monitoring devices, like where the populations are and and maybe if we've solved the problem. And then more importantly, I know that rats are a growing problem. So we are going to talk about how can we keep rats and mice out of the house. And again, we're going to replace that weather stripping on the doors and the garages. We're going to make sure those door sweeps have a tight fit. We're going to check the dryer vents and the chimney flues, and we're going to put that 1/4-inch hardware cloth over the chimney flue or behind the dryer vent. For the vents around the house, such as the foundation vent or the attic vent, we can use 1/4-inch hardware cloth. However, if you're in a fire-prone area, it's advised to use 1/8 inch because 1/8 inch also will keep embers out. We want to seal any gaps, any holes, any points of entry with the hardware cloth, and then we can fill that gap in with expanding foam or with mortar or plaster or whatever it is. But understand that rats will chew through anything you can think of, okay? And that's why we're specifically talking about hardware cloth that's galvanized, or you can also use that sheet metal roof flashing, that galvanized, that metal roof flashing, and that's ideal for cutting and putting it around pipes, like that pipe that might be coming in and out of the house from the hot water heater to the outside, or the hose bib. Sometimes you'll see that the rodents can gnaw in there and find their way in, but we can get that roof flashing and we can cut it really well and anchor it down with some hardware, and that will prevent them. And then we want to trim trees and vines away from the house. Understand that the rats can jump 3 feet across, so we really want to make sure that our roof lines are clear from trees, limbs and such. And really we want to stop feeding our pets outside, or we want to limit the food available to feeding our pets outside. And we want to then put the pet food into those metal garbage cans or metal containers to prevent the rodents from getting into it. When we do have rodent problems, the best way to manage rodents is with the kill traps. So the trick here with them is that we are going to bait these traps first, get them really used to feeding off these traps before we set the traps. And the reason why is because rodents are suspicious of new things. And we might not know what kind of bait that they're going to go for. Just because everyone says peanut butter doesn't mean that peanut butter is always going to work. Rodents are very, very smart. Although I like to say we're smarter. And the thing is if they have, if they saw anybody, any of their friends get killed going for the peanut butter, they will not go for peanut butter. So we want to be prepared. We want to place the traps out. We want to bait them first. Different types of bait we can go for is a little piece of a meat stick, like a Slim Jim, a little piece of a chewy granola bar, something that's chewy and sweet and kind of salty, like a Fig Newton or something similar to that. Dog kibble, kitty kibble, whatever they're already going for. Did they get into that bag of Doritos we left on the kitchen table overnight? Let's bait it with that. And then once we have them comfortably feeding off the trap, we can then set that trap. So when they fed off of it about 4 times, we can set it, and then we're going to have success. And then once we start to set live traps, just like we would if we're setting them outside for gophers and such, we want to monitor and make sure we're removing the death immediately, putting it in a bag that's sealed, and disposing of it. Rats in the garden is a really big topic right now because we have so much food out there. We've got our zucchinis that we're tired of harvesting and they're getting really big, or our tomatoes and such, and the apples are falling and all of that. So we want to clean up the gardens. We want to remove their places of harborage, like the ivy ground covers or the piles of brush that we have off to the side that we really just need to take to the dump, or those piles of flagstone or brick that we had a little extra left over from our project. We want to make sure compost systems and chicken coops are secure and that our floor, walls, and ceiling of 1/4-inch hardware cloth and or sealed off in another way. We want to make sure that the lids on the garbage cans are secure and locked, that we are removing that pet food availability from outside. We want to rethink bird feeders, and we also want to remove any of their food sources. And so that's where working with those exclusion baskets are going to come into play, which I'll show you in a minute. But we also see that during the winter months, we notice that the rats and the mice have a tendency to start to chew the bark off of our trees, specifically citrus trees. So have you ever had that experience? It's a big common problem in the Bay Area. So what we can do whenever possible is we can make a sleeve around the trunk of the plant with 1/4-inch hardware cloth, or we can wrap with that stretchy tree wrap. That's also going to help. Exclusion frames, so I'll show them to you again. We're going to work with 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and we're going to prevent the rodents from accessing the food whenever possible. And then if it comes to the urban critters that are slightly larger, such as raccoons, we happen to see a lot of raccoon activity this time of year. They're coming in our gardens, they're digging up the lawns, they're looking for the grubs. Well, if that's the case, we want to remove those food sources. And how we remove the food source is by getting rid of the grubs. And a great way to get rid of the grubs is by applying beneficial nematodes, which we can purchase online, or we can get them at our local garden center. And we inoculate the soils with the beneficial nematodes, and they will feed off of the soil-dwelling larvae. We can also lay out poultry wire or bird netting to prevent the raccoons from digging up the lawn. And we also want to really encourage people to not feed the wildlife. I'm not sure if you're aware, I just recently learned that it is against California code regulations to feed wildlife. So please avoid feeding the wildlife. We do not want to encourage them to come and feed from our properties. It also becomes a nuisance for other people. And if we need to use a repellent, there is one product that I can share can help with repelling raccoons, maybe squirrels. I can't speak to that, but I can speak to raccoons. For all the years I worked in a garden center, this was the one and only product that people did say kind of worked. It's Critter by Safer. Safer does own Have a Heart, so they've just recently changed their branding. So it used to be blue, now it's green. However, this is going to be hit or miss, and you will most likely have to reapply. But if you're looking for a repellent, this would be the one and only I could maybe recommend, because of the combination of actives is really fantastic. Slugs and snails, once we get into the rainy season, they're going to be super active. So, I like to go out at night with a bucket of soapy water, wear gloves, hand pick them off, dump them in the soapy water. Use snail boards, which are a board that has like little risers underneath, so it's lifted, but once the sun comes up, snails and slugs do not like the sun, so they'll go under there for shade, and then you can lift up that board and just literally scrape them off into the soapy water. It's totally gross. But Sluggo or Natria or Bonide, they all make these baits containing the iron phosphate, which are very effective. They are non-toxic. They are not poisonous to wildlife. They're not poisonous to our pets. However, if your dog got into a large volume of this slug bait, then you most likely will want to take them to the vet just to make sure that they don't have an allergic reaction or anything like that. But when we're just broadcasting it out in our gardens according to the labels and instructions, this is not going to be poisonous to our birds. It's not going to be poisonous to our wildlife. It's not going to be poisonous to our pets. Another thing we can do is water early in the morning so that the the water can dry out before night, so that it won't attract more slugs and snails. And then using a chunky mulch, so like an arbor mulch or something that's bigger, chips, we can use that as a barrier. It prevents the slugs and snails from crossing it. So with that, I can say thank you for your time and attention. Here are some more email or website resources for you, for Milpitas, for Sunnyvale, for myself. If any questions ever come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can also go to my website, sign onto my blog or newsletter. I send it out with little tips on pest problem solving about anywhere from 1 to 4 times a month, not that often. They're short and sweet, and there'll be more information like we shared tonight. But with that, if you have to get off our call or our program right now, I understand. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. If you've got more questions, let's go through them.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We are going to stay around for questions, but thank you to anyone that does have to leave. So lots of questions. One that came earlier is for rainwater collection. Have you been able to connect that to drip systems, or is the pressure too low?
Okay, so if you have a very large like cistern or water holding tank, the larger it is, I understand that you can connect it to a type of irrigation system. However, it's not necessarily going to be, I don't think it's going to be necessarily connected to little drip emitters. It might be more like the laundry to landscape way, where it's actually going to catch basins. But to be honest, I'm not really 100% sure the outcome. I haven't set one of those systems up, so I'm not sure. But not typically, no. Like that, like the smaller holding capacity, there's just not enough volume, gravity. And usually it's just going to be hooked up where you would be putting it in like a watering can. Maybe you can hook it up to a hose and like water like an area that's just short, close by. But I wouldn't necessarily. I am only using my 50-gallon rain barrel for filling a watering can because it just doesn't have that kind of capacity. So it really depends, but you can reach out to your local landscape and irrigation supply, and especially anyone that sells those, like the farm supply or the irrigation supply, definitely can answer that question with more of an expert answer.
Great. We have a question on what is a good weed remover for everyday use?
Oh, that's going to be our hands. Hand pulling is the best way to manage weeds. However, that's not the answer anyone wants to hear. So you can use tools like the hula hoe, or even like a shovel or a hard, the bow rake to just scrape the weeds off. That's all we need to do. If we have perennial weeds that have deep tap roots, then getting a weeder, like some type of a handheld weeding tool to get dandelions and things like that. But really, if we are out there monitoring our gardens every day, we're at a place that we can, spend 10, 15 minutes just hand pulling all the new little sprouts that came up. The other thing is, understand the best time to pull weeds is when they're like a half an inch to an inch, maybe 2 inches tall. We don't want to wait until they're, like 6 inches tall and already gone to flower. We want to manage the weeds when they're little. So that's the best way to handle it.
Great. Another question we have is tanglefoot dangerous to beneficials, and would sticky traps also be dangerous to beneficials? That's
a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So tanglefoot is specifically going to go around the trunks or branches of a tree or a shrub that has ants crawling up. And you're typically just putting a very, very thin band. So you're getting maybe some narrow tape or narrow material, or it could be wide. The material could be wide, something that you're going to be applying the tanglefoot on. And it's literally, you're going to apply it like toothpaste, where it is just a very narrow line. of the Tanglefoot. You're not putting a whole bunch on, because one, you'd be wasting product, and it would be a little bit, and it's not necessary. You just really want to prevent the ants. You want to kind of stop them in their tracks. If you put too much on, I've heard that people have just like slathered it on the tree, and like birds get stuck to it and stuff. So that's just no good for anyone. So really you're just using, you're putting some nice banding material on that you can remove later, and you're just doing a little like bead, so to speak. Sticky traps, and I guess back to the beneficial insects. Beneficial insects hopefully are not necessarily in that area. It's not close to flowers. But yeah, if a beneficial insect were walking up, like a ladybug larva or a ladybug, yeah, sure, they could get stuck as well. I haven't seen that in all the years I've used Tanglefoot, but to the sticky insect traps, like the yellow cards or the yellow and blue cards, I have seen beneficial insects get stuck to that. So it's not a lot. It really just depends on what is your threshold. What are you trying to monitor? Is it codling moths? Oftentimes the codling moths are, it's a different shape of trap, and there's a pheromone lure. So it's going to attract specifically just the codling moths. Are going to go into like this little like tent, and they'll get stuck inside, not usually attracting any beneficial insects. I have used those yellow sticky cards that have a pheromone attractant for the Diabrotica or the cucumber beetle. And yes, it attracted a lot of the cucumber beetles, and so much it was quite impressive. The whole thing was covered within a couple days. But it also got some beneficial insects. So keeping that in mind, you have to decide what is your threshold, and do you really need to use that trap? Is there another way to manage it? Diabroticas are very difficult to manage, and this happened to be a really bad year one summer about 4 years ago. So yeah, you just want to understand that there's risks. So whenever we're working with pest management, we have to, keep in mind the risks and try to avoid capturing or killing the non-targeted pest. So
great. Another couple questions about gardening and pests. We have a question about keeping rats away from produce and if red pepper on the soil works. We also have a question to do with rats, to keep them away from the veggie garden. And they say they garden in troops, and that sometimes has eaten all the newly planted broccoli, cilantro, and arugula. And I know you went over some practices with the enclosures, but if there's anything else you would like to add.
Yeah, so those rats are a big deal. I talk about rats almost every single day. So those exclusion frames, the nice tall ones that look like A-frames, those were built at a public education garden in San Francisco, which is a registered CSA, which is a garden that teaches people how to grow food. I'm one of the educators there as well. It's called the Garden for the Environment. The rodent problem was so significant that they have to have the frames on the produce 24/7. It also helps to prevent people from harvesting the food that are not supposed to be harvesting the food. But for our vegetable gardens, when we're growing food, understand that critters are going to come and eat it. It's just the nature of things. And so whenever possible, we have to create exclusion. We have to remove the food source. And the way we remove the food source is by preventing them from accessing it. I think that exclusion frames are rather easy and inexpensive to build and create. You just get, like a 1x1 frame that you tack together and then staple gun the 1/4-inch hardware cloth on. They're lightweight. You can move them around. Those frames were built at the Garden for the Environment because they needed to be a little bit more secure, and they made them in a way that they could lift it up and still harvest and access and plant and dig without having to completely remove the whole frame. When we are growing food in our gardens, not only do we need to exclude the food that we're growing from the rodents, but we also want to remove the places of harborage. We want to see, like, is there a place that they might be hanging out? Is there a big pile of leaves, or is there open compost, or is there a bunch of ground cover that they might be living in? When it comes to repellents, pepper does not work for rodents. What works, what we're seeing on the market that does work, is any type of a rodent repellent that has castor oil in it. That's a castor oil is a repellent used for gophers, moles, and voles. It is a very viscous oil that's not toxic. It gets on the whiskers of the rodent and it just messes them up because they use their whiskers as hypersensitive feelers, and they can't necessarily like take a shower to wash it off. However, we only see this more for spraying on the barks of trees, like citrus trees, because as I mentioned, they have a tendency to eat the bark off of the trees. One product I know, IV Organics, makes castor oil repellent, and it's very effective. However, it's not always easy to find it in the at the retailers. But repellents are not sustainable. They're not always going to do what we need them to do. They're usually kind of, we're using them as a secondary or as a Band-Aid until we can resolve the problem. So let's also understand that. If you notice, I didn't talk about repellents too much in the program. Really what you want to do is manage the rodents the best you can and exclude them from eating your food. And harvest your food. The rodents really like their leafy greens. They really like their high nutrient vegetables. And we have to get in the habit of harvesting when the food is ripe, not keeping it on the out there too long. But I do know that they'll mow down an entire bed of leafy greens in one night. So that's why we always go to the exclusion baskets whenever possible.
So in terms of fertilizer, someone has asked, do you have a specific organic fertilizer that you recommend as opposed to some non-organic options such as Miracle-Gro?
Oh yeah, Miracle-Gro is high in salts and not very good for the health of your soil. But organic fertilizers, if you're looking for liquid organic fertilizers similar to the Miracle-Gro, Miracle-Gro does right now make a product that is organic. It's OMRI certified and it's called Performance Organics. And you can buy it at your local hardware store, local home improvement, and it's the organic version of Miracle-Gro. So if you are just looking for something that's something just immediately swap out, great. I've never used it, but it's pretty exciting that Miracle-Gro is they're starting to work with some very high-end smart science and get some good organic products out there. My go-to is always going to be fish hydrolysate or fish emulsion and liquid seaweed. And the reason why I like the liquid seaweed or the liquid sea kelp is because it's a cell growth stimulator. It stimulates the growth of healthy cells. So it really bolsters the health of the plant. And the liquid fish emulsion or fish hydrolysate is going to really add a lot of beautiful nutrients to the soil and feed the microbiology and really keep it healthy. So those are kind of my go-tos. You can also go to Fox Farm Big Bloom, I think it is, where it's kind of a red label and it's got like the fat guano and the fish emulsion and a lot of really great things in it. I also know that EB Stone and Garden and Bloom, Kellogg's, they all make really great kind of all-purpose liquid fertilizers that you mix with water in your watering can and you do a soil drench or a foliar spray, and they're all amazing, really good quality products.
Awesome, great tips. In terms of some flying insects, do you have any particular tips in terms of fleas and fungus gnats?
So flying insects inside the house, just in general, if we put a fan on, understand that flying insects are not that strong of flyers. So when we have a fan on, it is typically going to prevent those flying insects from coming in our house. Putting screens in the windows, making sure we have screen doors, all of that prevents them from coming in because those are barriers. If we've got fungus gnats in the house, like in one of our house plants, there is a product called Mosquito Bits, and it is a beneficial bacteria, and we sprinkle it onto the top of the soil of our house plants, and I think we just work it in about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch. You want to read the labels, instructions, and the larva of the fungus gnats will feed off of that bait, and it kills them. If we've got fruit flies, because we have compost systems next to our sink, or we've got fruit that's really ripe on the counter, putting that, getting that food into the compost bin outside would be ideal, doing it more frequently. But if we can't do it as frequently, maybe we're on the 3rd story level of an apartment complex, or it's just not that convenient, keeping that bin inside the refrigerator will prevent the fruit flies. If it's fleas inside, you want to, I might actually check out the fact sheet on the Our Water, Our World website. There is, if you go to fact sheets, there's one on fleas. Go ahead and read through that. But what I can share is just like a lot of cleaning in the house, vacuuming, washing the pet beds, all of that. There are these really cool flea traps that you can buy, again, at the hardware stores or home improvements, either by Victor or by BioCare. And they literally are sticky traps that have a light. And when you plug it in, kind of like a room deodorizer, the heat attracts the fleas, and then they jump in underneath that light and stick to the sticky paper. So it's very simple, but very effective. And then if it's outside in the gardens, we want to, if we've got fleas, if the pets are bringing fleas in because they're going outside and they're picking it up from other, like our urban critters, if we have an active garden, that means it's not a dog run. It's actually like planted, and there's, a garden that is getting irrigated and all of that. We can apply beneficial nematodes because the flea larva lives in the soil. And when we apply those beneficial nematodes, similar to the grubs, the nematodes eat soil dwelling larvae. So that's another way to manage it. In regards to like pet shampoos and things like that, I would encourage you to find pet shampoos that are not going to have pyrethroids. Pyrethroids are highly toxic to our waterways. They don't get filtered out at the treatment centers, the water treatment plants, so they're staying in our waterways, and they're a problem. And those are products that end with like a thrin, like permethrin, deltamethrin, suflethrin. So if I was going for a flea shampoo, I would get something that was going to have natural ingredients that would not be toxic to our waterways or toxic to my pet.
Great, and I just dropped the link for that Our Water, Our World fleas page in the chat for anyone who needs it.
Thank you.
Some more on specific pests. Do you have any specific tips about both rabbits and squirrels in the garden?
So rabbits, you'd want to work with fencing, again, barrier. And squirrels are going to be a little bit more challenging because they can climb and jump and all of that. So squirrels are probably the most challenging, similar to raccoons. At least with raccoons, you can be a little bit more successful with exclusion. Like the damage that raccoons do is slightly different than the damage that squirrels do. The damage that squirrels do is such a nuisance and such a problem. So encouraging, if you've got squirrels coming to your property and you are feeding the birds, just get rid of those bird feeders. You really want to discourage the squirrels from coming to your property. If they're digging in your flower pots, just temporarily cover the flower pots with, poultry wire or any type of wire. It can be larger gauge because the squirrels, we don't need to do small gauge like 1/2 inch poultry wire is fine. They're not going to fit through it. And poultry wire is really easy to bend. So just doing like a frame that you put over your plants temporarily could help. But yeah, sorry, you could try the Critter Ritter. I know Messina has a repellent that's a squirrel stopper that I hear works really well, but I haven't tried it myself. And I don't have a lot of experience like with customers I used to work with that came back and told me, oh yeah, this worked really well. I'm just hearing a word of mouth that it's working through some of the retailers I work with, that their customers are saying it works, but you could try it. So that's Messina, squirrel stopper, or you could try the Critter Ritter.
Great. And then you said that bird feeders can attract squirrels. So would you suggest getting rid of bird feeders?
Yeah, I would. The birds don't, I mean, it's so sweet to feed the birds, but the birds can find food out there. Hopefully you are planting, or you're able to plant flowers that offer seeds for the birds. I will plant echinacea. I will plant sunflowers. And though the sunflowers will also attract the squirrels, it's going to be a limited season. Yeah, if I have squirrels, I'm going to try to avoid attracting them whenever possible, and maybe limit it to just planting echinacea or coneflower, because the birds will enjoy that seed. Or try to, ask at your local garden center what are going to be some plants, some flowering things that will provide food for the birds. But understand, birds come in and they eat the aphids. I see these little tiny babies, like I think they're oak tits, that are going through all my shrubs because it's warm. We've got aphids again, and they're eating the aphids. So it's pretty cool. I mean, birds eat insects as well. So I would definitely try, because just consider removing the bird feeders whenever possible. I know it's sad.
Gotcha. Back to weeds. Does vinegar help out with weeds?
Vinegar is a tricky one. I know that they're selling vinegar now on the market as an herbicide, an eco herbicide. A couple things I gotta let you know about is that this is a stronger percentage of vinegar than just our regular cooking, like salad vinegar. It can burn your skin, it can burn your eyes. You need to be very careful. So again, these are not risk-free. Nothing that we're using in the garden that is again, be it a do-it-yourself or a product that you buy, even though it's eco-friendly, we really want to be careful. Things that are not risk-free are all those tools and all, like building the health of the garden. All of that is, going to be very helpful. If you are looking just to, if you're looking for an alternative to Roundup, and you want to kill your weeds, boiling water kills weeds. It's just not really easy to get out there with the kettle, but after I've boiled pasta, or if we've had some type, like a crab boil, and there's like salty water and it's boiling, we'll dump it out. Usually the weeds that are going from the side door to the driveway, just dump it out, kills them. But keep in mind that then what I'm left with is these dead brown weeds. Whereas if I'm going through and hand weeding them or using some type of a weeding tool, then I'm removing them and it's not, a problem anymore. But just understand, if you're working with vinegar, you do not need to add salt to it. You don't, I know if you're doing it yourself, I think one of the recipes online is adding like a dish detergent, but that dish detergent can also be really a problem, because it's got so many additives in it. It's not natural. But if you're buying it from the store, read the directions on the label and you can use it straight. Just make sure you don't burn yourself. Be very, very careful.
Great. Okay, just a couple more questions here, unless anyone would like to add some more. We have one question about leaf miners. Getting a lot of them and wondering what we can do about it.
Is a leaf miner on the citrus or on the vegetables? Is it a vegetable leaf miner or a citrus leaf miner?
Maddie, you can also raise your hand if you're still on, who asked this question, and we can unmute you so you can talk directly. So I'm going to allow you to talk, Maddie.
Yeah, hi. So I have a couple of gourd plants like cucumber and ridge gourd. They're like Asian vegetables. So I have winter melon. So I have like across my yard, probably it's more than 10,000 square foot. So they spread through entire yard. I mean, it's just not only gourds. So it doesn't spread anywhere else, but it's like probably they're like 50 feet away, but still both plants have it. No other plants get it. So only these, and I've seen a lot of pictures on Nextdoor where everybody, I mean, they're not complaining, but I see the leaf miners on almost all cucumber plants.
Okay, so I've got good news for you. The leaf miner is just on the leaves, and are you eating the leaves of the cucumber plants?
No, I don't, but I kind of see that even the plant is drying up. I don't see any other reason. I mean, yeah, I don't see any other reason than the leaf miner, which is probably killing the plant.
The leaf miners are just doing damage to the leaves. It's not doing any damage to the fruiting parts. I can tell you, my cucumbers, the leaves look really crummy. It's just been such a hot summer. We've had a number of excessive heat periods throughout the summer where the leaves are just crusty. I want to ask you to consider a couple of things. Are you watering the plants appropriately? Are you letting the plants dry out between watering? So that means watering it well and then letting the top couple inches of it dry before you add more water. Do we have mulch on top of the soil? And then have you fertilized lately? I have a tendency to kind of get off the fertilizing schedule by midsummer because it starts to get really hot out there, and then I have a tendency to just do my harvest and not spend a lot of extra time fertilizing. So I also know when I'm not fertilizing my vegetable crops, they have a tendency to start to look a little crummy. But if your plants are still producing food and they're producing nice food, then what I would like to share, and then also understand, the longer the plants are in the ground, we're really coming towards the end of their season, they're going to also kind of start to look sad. But I would say, for at least from my experience this year, heat was the #1 reason why the leaves of so many of my vegetables look crummy. And then, yeah. So consider that. Just consider that. If you'd like to send me some pictures of what you're talking about, what I always like to ask is that you send a general photo of the plant, and then have a picture, and then if you're holding it, or if you could put like a pencil like as a scale next to where you see the problem and have kind of a close-up, but it has to be clear. It can't be blurry. And then you can email the pictures to me and I can have a look.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Maddie.
All right, we have one more question in the Q&A. We also have a couple more minutes if anyone has some last final questions. So we will go with this question. It's about dead animals. Why do you have to remove them from the garden immediately?
If it's, okay, so if it's gophers, if they're underground and you've captured them, I'd like to say there's a little bit more leeway. And usually what I do is I just release them and I bury them in that tunnel or in that hole. And then it kind of prevents more gophers from coming over there. It's kind of gross, but it just acts as like a repellent. If it's rats, a couple of things. You want to, rats are really smart. And a couple things. One, when they get killed, they'll release this enzyme that says, danger, don't come here. So they kind of skunk the trap, is what I understand. So then if you are trying to use that trap again, and if it's really been skunked with the death, you won't have success. The other thing is if they saw their buddies getting killed, they're not going to either visit that trap in that location. So you'll have to move the location, and you'll have to most likely change the bait, because as I mentioned before, is if they saw their buddy going for like the Slim Jim, and even though it was their favorite bait of all time, they're going to like learn like, oh wow, we can't go for that because that was a trick, that was a setup, our buddy got snapped. So that's the other reason. And you also just don't want death hanging around the garden or anywhere on your property, because it starts to decompose and then it becomes a vector of other problems, you know. So we really want to dispose of it properly. Either if you live on a large property and you can bury it, great. Or what we're going to do is, you know, put it in a bag, seal it, and put it in the garbage. If you are burying, you want to make sure you bury it deep enough so that other critters, like a neighbor's dog or neighbor's cat, doesn't dig it up.
Great, so we can take one or two more questions. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask Suzanne yourself. Otherwise, I do see one in the Q&A. We do have a comment about it's good to learn how smart rats are. And keeping that in mind. Do we have any other questions? Give it 1 or 2 minutes. We do have one.
Oh no, Linda, we lost you.
Sorry, we have one person who raised their hand. So Yubin, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hi, really thank you for all the tips. It's really helpful. I have one question. I have a cat that likes to go out. Is there anything I should pay attention to in any gardening usage or just in general?
In regards to
well, I think maybe including fertilizer, including any chemical that may be related.
Yeah, that would be toxic to your kitty cat.
Right.
Yeah, that's really, I appreciate this question, because kitty cats are not able to digest things in the same fashion as like dogs or other mammals. They have a very complex stomach, I understand. And so that's most important. If we've got kitty cats, we really want to reduce any type of those chemical pesticides, any of those chemical fertilizers, any chemicals at all, because as they walk and they lick their pads and they clean themselves, they're ingesting it. So yeah, just be aware of that. As in regards to the organic fertilizer, it really is always mostly going to be in the soil. It's also mostly going to be on the plants. It's not necessarily going to be toxic that I'm aware of. You might talk to your vet about that just to confirm, but I'm just thinking about all the ingredients in organic fertilizer. They're all naturally sourced, you know, like cottonseed meal, alfalfa meal, fishbone meal. If anything, your kitty cat might be curious. I know it sometimes the fertilizers attract urban critters, attract the dogs usually really like to sniff around, and maybe the kitty cat will too. Eco pesticides, again, once they're dry, they are not going to have the residuals that are going to be toxic to our pets. So that's why it's so important to use at the end of the day, and when our pets are inside and beneficial insects are not going to be as active or present. And then that product has all night to dry if it is a liquid pesticide. If it's like a bait, if you're concerned, okay, so like for instance, that outdoor bait station, the liquid ant bait station that was outdoors, sadly, I used one and a critter chewed it. And though boric acid is less toxic, it's not completely non-toxic. So it depends on the weight of that mammal. If that mammal was small enough and they ingested enough of it, it could have been lethal. So I've learned, that's how we always learn, right? From our mistakes or when things don't go exactly right. I've learned now to put like a milk crate over the ant bait station, or I've learned to put a gopher basket that's opened and anchored in, you know, with some landscape pins. So now only the ant can get to the bait station, not a critter. So if that's the case, if you have to apply something to an area that you have some concern about your kitty cat, then make sure there is some type of a barrier that will prevent your kitty cat from accessing that area during the time that that product is available.
Super helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. I think we're going to answer this one last question and then wrap up. So we have a question on ornamental companion plants that reduce pests on neighboring plants. Any good combinations?
That I love it. I'm a huge fan of companion planting. However, my my strategy for companion planting is by planting plants that actually are friends, that can share the soil area, that they're not competing for nutrients in the soil, so that they can grow to their optimum health. In regards to companion plants that might deter pests, I know that there are some, usually I'll go to the Farmer's Almanac and like look at the list, but feverfew or tansy, that's another common name. That's going to be a nice pest repellent. It's actually where they manufacture the pyrethrin, the natural pyrethroid, the one that isn't toxic to our environment, comes from the feverfew or tansy. So I like to have that around my garden. It's also a really nice plant that offers a nectar source for beneficial pollinators. I can share that marigolds, of course. I mean, I think that some of my professional friends say that that's just like an old wives' tale, but I always plant marigolds around my tomatoes, and I have a lot of success. I also plant basil on the shaded side of my tomatoes. They still get the heat, but they're shaded. But for some reason, that the scent, you know, it's a very strong scent. So I think that deters some insects. And I've also heard, plants that have stronger fragrances often work really well as deterrents. But to be honest, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specific, and that's why I always reference the, an online resource that I can say is good, like the Farmer's Almanac. I think Burpee has one too. But yeah,
Great.
sorry. Hopefully it wasn't too disappointing with my answer, but yeah, I want to thank everyone. And if any more questions ever come up, please don't hesitate to email me. I'm available to answer your questions. And I just want to thank everyone for still sticking around, staying on, and for all your great questions. It was really fun.
Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Please join us for upcoming future Bosco classes. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Bosco website. Just give some time for it to get uploaded there. Thank you again. If you have any specific questions about Milpitas or Sunnyvale, don't feel free to reach out to us, and feel free to reach out to Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne. And thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.